There are moments when something ancient stirs within you, a whisper from a place you cannot name, yet somehow recognize. It rises not from your thoughts, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere that remembers what your waking mind has forgotten. This is not imagination. This is not fantasy. This is the shadow speaking, the part of you that has been waiting, watching, gathering everything you've ever pushed aside, every version of yourself you were told to bury. And today, you're going to meet it face to face. But here's what most people never understand. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the key to your wholeness. It holds the very power you've been searching for your entire life. And in the next few minutes, you're going to discover which shadow archetype has been shaping your life from the darkness all along. Most people will never know this about themselves. They'll
spend decades running from the very thing that could set them free. Will you be one of them? Or will you stay with me and finally see what's been hiding in plain sight? Before we go any further, if you're ready to explore the depths of your own psyche, to uncover truths that most people are too afraid to face, subscribe now. Because what you're about to experience isn't entertainment, it's excavation. And not everyone survives the descent unchanged. Let's begin. Before you stand 4 doorways. Each one leads to a different chamber of the unconscious. Each one holds a different shadow, a different forgotten self, a different source of hidden power. One of these doorways has always belonged to you. You've stood before it in dreams you can't remember. You've felt its pull in moments of strange familiarity, in emotions that seemed too large for their cause. Don't analyze. Don't calculate. Let your body choose. Notice which doorway creates a subtle tension in your chest. Which one makes your breath change even slightly? Which one feels like recognition rather than curiosity?
The first doorway is made of iron, ancient and unmovable, marked with symbols of conflict and protection. The second doorway is crafted from mirrors, reflecting infinite versions of yourself, each one slightly different. The third doorway appears as woven vines, organic and alive, pulsing with something that feels both nurturing and suffocating. The fourth doorway is simply darkness, an absence so complete it seems to breathe. Your choice will reveal not what you lack, but what you've been denying. Because the shadow is not weakness. It is strength that was never given permission to exist. Now pause if you need to, Let your unconscious decide. When you're ready, continue, and I'll show you what has been waiting in the dark. If you chose the first doorway, the iron gate marked with symbols of battle, you carry the shadow of the warrior. This is the part of you that was told anger is dangerous, that power corrupts, that strength must be softened, hidden, apologized for. So you learned to smile when you wanted to roar. You learned to accommodate when every cell in your body screamed to resist. You became agreeable, and something essential in you went to sleep. But it never died. It waited. The warrior shadow is not violence. It is vital force. It is the capacity to say no without guilt, to protect what matters without hesitation, to stand firm when everything pressures you to bend. You have spent years redirecting this energy, perhaps into overwork, into control, into silent resentment that eats at you from within, perhaps into sudden eruptions that shocked even you, moments when the shadow broke through and you wondered who that person was. That person was you, the version of you that refused to disappear completely. Here's the truth most people never learn. Anger, real anger, is sacred. It tells you where your boundaries have been violated. It shows you what you truly value. It is the fire that burns away what no longer serves. But you were taught to fear it, so you buried it. And in burying it, you buried your power. The warrior shadow asks one question. What would you do if you weren't afraid of your own strength? The answer to that question is the doorway to your authentic self, the self that doesn't need permission, the self that protects without apologizing, the self that knows its worth, not because someone told you, but because you finally stopped hiding from your own fire. If the mirrored doorway called to you, reflecting endless versions of yourself, you carry the shadow of the persona. This is perhaps the most hidden shadow of all, because it hides in plain sight. It is the face you show the world, the performance so convincing that you forgot it was performance at all. Somewhere along the way, you learned that who you really are was not acceptable, not lovable, not safe. So you became what others needed. You became charming or competent, helpful or invisible, whatever role guaranteed survival. And you played it so perfectly that you lost track of the actor beneath the mask. The shadow of the persona is not falseness. It is the authentic self that was sacrificed for belonging. It lives in the moments when you feel strangely empty despite external success, in the relationships where you're loved for who you pretend to be, in the exhaustion of performing even when you're alone. You know this shadow by the question it whispers in quiet moments. Who would I be if no one was watching? You know it by the fear that grips you when you imagine dropping the mask. Not the fear that others would reject you, but the deeper fear that there might be nothing underneath. But there is something underneath. There is someone, the person you were before you learned that you needed to be different. This shadow doesn't want to destroy your social self. It wants to free you from the prison of performance. It wants you to discover that you can be seen, truly seen, and still be loved. That authenticity is not a risk to belonging. It is the only path to real connection. Now, before we continue to the final two shadows, I need to ask you something directly. Are you beginning to feel the weight of recognition? That strange sensation that someone is finally speaking what you've always known but couldn't name. If this is reaching you, do something that might feel uncomfortable. Leave a comment below. Tell me which doorway you chose, which shadow is beginning to reveal itself. When you speak it aloud, you begin to own it, and I read every single response. Also, if you're finding value in this, subscribe and hit the bell. This channel exists for those rare souls willing to descend into their own depths, the ones who know that the treasure is always guarded by the dragon. Let's continue. If the doorway of vines called to you, alive and reaching, you carry the shadow of the caretaker. This is the part of you that learned love means erasure, that your worth is measured by what you give, never by what you receive, that your own needs are selfish, your own desires dangerous, your own pain somehow less valid than everyone else's. So you became the one who holds everything together, the one who senses what others need before they know themselves, the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left, and then gives more because stopping feels like dying. But here's what the shadow knows that you've been afraid to see. Underneath all that giving lies a hunger so profound it terrifies you. A need to be cared for, to be chosen, to be seen without having to earn it through sacrifice. This is not weakness. This is the birthright you were denied. The caretaker's shadow reveals itself in exhaustion that feels like identity, in resentment that you immediately feel guilty for feeling, in the strange emptiness that follows even your greatest acts of service. You give because it's the only way you know how to exist. And somewhere deep inside, a child is still waiting to be held instead of holding.
This shadow doesn't want you to stop caring. It wants you to include yourself in the circle of your own compassion, to understand that receiving is not taking, that rest is not abandonment, that you are allowed finally and fully to need. If the doorway of pure darkness called to you, the absence that somehow felt alive, you carry the shadow of the void. This is the deepest shadow, the most misunderstood. It is the part of you that has touched meaninglessness and survived, that has looked into the emptiness and found something staring back. You have known despair that others cannot imagine. Moments when everything you believed dissolved, when the structures that held your identity collapsed into nothing. Perhaps it happened suddenly, through loss, through betrayal, through an experience that shattered your world. Perhaps it happened slowly, a gradual erosion of meaning that left you hollow.
Others run from this darkness their entire lives. You have lived in it, and that changes everything. The shadow of the void is not nihilism. It is the ground zero from which authentic meaning can finally be built. Because you have lost everything once, you know that everything can be lost. And paradoxically, this makes you more alive, more present, more capable of genuine appreciation than those who still believe in permanence. You carry a strange gift, the ability to sit with others in their darkest moments without flinching, the capacity to speak about death, about meaninglessness, about the things that terrify others, with a calm that comes from direct experience. People sense this about you, even if they can't name it. They know you've been somewhere they haven't, and it both draws them to you and unnerves them. The void shadow asks you to stop pathologizing your descent, to recognize that what broke you also initiated you, that the emptiness was not a failure, but a passage, and that the meaning you build now, having touched the bottom, is more real than anything you believed before. Now that you've seen all four shadows, understand this. You don't carry just one. You carry all of them in different proportions at different times. The warrior who was silenced, the persona who performed survival, the caretaker who forgot themselves in service, the void dweller who touched the abyss. These shadows are not enemies to defeat. They are exiles to welcome home. Every quality you denied became a shadow. Every emotion you suppressed became a saboteur. Every truth you refused to speak became a voice in the dark, growing louder until you finally listened. Integration is not about destroying the shadow. It is about recognizing that the shadow and the light are two sides of the same wholeness, that you cannot be complete while half of yourself remains banished, that the very things you fear most about yourself are often your greatest gifts in disguise. The warrior's anger becomes righteous protection. The persona's adaptability becomes genuine empathy. The caretaker's sensitivity becomes authentic connection. The void's emptiness becomes the space where new meaning can grow. You are not broken. You are not dark. You are a complete human being who was taught to live as a fraction. And today, in this moment, you have begun the return to wholeness. So breathe, Feel the parts of yourself that have been waiting in the shadows, waiting for your recognition. They don't need your fear. They need your embrace. Which shadow spoke to you most clearly? Which exile is ready to come home? Tell me in the comments below, because naming the shadow is the first step to integrating it. And if this has touched something real in you, share this with someone else who is ready to meet themselves in the dark. Subscribe, because this is only the beginning. There are depths within you that we've barely glimpsed, chambers of the unconscious still waiting to be explored. And I'll be here, guiding you deeper with every video. Until next time, remember, the shadow is not what you need to escape. It is what you need to embrace. The gold is always hidden in the darkness. And you've already begun the descent.